This is Liz Pelly, and you're listening to Critical Listening, Episode 11. We're starting our new season with an episode recorded in the city of Groningen in the Netherlands, where Max and I were invited to do a live taping of the podcast at an industry conference called ESNS. For that episode, we interviewed a local investigative reporter named Henk Willem Smits about private equity investments into European music festivals and some other topics. You'll hear that live taping next month on episode 12. But while we were in Groningen at this conference, we took the opportunity to also do some digging around, attending some sessions and listening to some interesting people talk about interesting things. We also each spoke on a few panels about streaming, AI, and politics. So in this episode, we're reflecting on some things we heard at the panels we attended, panels we participated in, and also thinking a bit about the season ahead for the podcast. Hope you enjoyed this episode, and thanks to ESNS for having us.
This is our first time in person.
It is our first time in person, yeah.
Oh
Happy 2026.
Happy 2026, Liz.
Yes.
To the critical listeners out there, you know what it is. It's season 2, 2026, critical listening.
Episode 11.
Episode 11.
In real life.
IRL.
So we are also in a place that I think neither of us has ever been before.
Nope.
We are in Groningen.
Groningen?
Groningen?
You gotta say it with some
Okay, we're in Groningen. We're in the Netherlands.
We're in the Netherlands. We're in the northern Netherlands where the sun rises at 8:45, which freaked us both out.
And it goes down at 4 p.m.
Yes.
Or something.
I guess
very
we're a little
early.
north.
Yeah. And we are here because we are at a conference.
Sure are.
Called ESNS, Eurosonic Norderslag.
Norderslag.
And ESNS, what is it?
ESNS, what is it?
Let me tell you.
Yes, read it off.
ESNS is an independent platform that puts European music talent in the global spotlight. ESNS offers European artists career-defining opportunities to break through and become the headliners of tomorrow. Every January, Groningen transforms into the beating heart of the European music industry when ESNS hosts its Showcase Festival and Music Conference. Only the freshest European acts are invited to perform for passionate new fans and industry pros, helping them pave the way to the stages of major European music festivals.
So if your freshness game is lacking, you better up your shit or get the hell out of here, because only the freshest are coming here.
If there's anything we love at the Critical Listening podcast, it's the freshest of talent.
Oh my god!
Why do you think we're here?
I'm kind of confused, asking myself the same question. Granted, there have been some very interesting individual panelists scattered throughout this.
Yeah, that's true.
But it is a trade event. The conference is a trade conference. And are either of us trade professionals in the music industry?
We arrived in the Netherlands yesterday. Today, there was a series of panels on different topics related to the state of the music business. Max and I were each on a few different panels, but in addition to the panels that we were on, we decided to go attend some of them too. And the ones that we decided to attend were about AI, because it seems important.
First thing we want to do in the morning is go to an AI panel.
Yeah, so we went to one panel that was on like the state of the responsible AI marketplace. And then we went to one that, as soon as I read the name of it, I decided we were definitely going to, which was called Automate or Die Trying,
Oh,
which
yeah.
is about different sort of like aspects of the music business outside of songwriting and composing that are being automated. So this was mostly having to do with like the live music world and the festival industry, and how those corners of the music business are incorporating automated decision making in order to cut costs.
It felt like the first panel was like automating the front end of the music industry, meaning the music itself, and the second one was automating the back end, all of the admin work and the various tasks required in everything from concert promotion through running a label, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would say like, on the responsible AI front, if there was one takeaway for me from that, it's, maybe unsurprisingly that the word responsible means different things to different people. And, even as some of the people who are on this panel were saying, like, right now, I think there's this sense that if an AI model is made using training data that has been legally licensed, that it automatically means that it is responsible. And it's very clear that, that's not always the case.
Right.
We can't just assume that something is responsible or ethical just because it is not the result of a blatant process of like theft of intellectual property.
Sure.
There's still, as we've said, many times on the show already, there's still consequences for labor. So that was interesting to like kind of hear that perspective to some degree reflected.
This was all a wonderful demonstration in dialectics and the importance or lack thereof in specific language regarding these things. So talking about responsibility, sure, there's plenty of definitions to go around as to what that means, but also the the talking for musicians in the first panel happened quite a bit, as far as like, this will improve your music, this will help create more efficiency in the studio, things of that nature. And it's like, according to whom? I understand there was researchers involved in this who work in the academic sector, and they are often working alongside academic musicians, computer musicians, and such and stuff like that. But it just rubbed me the wrong way that there wasn't a practitioner among the first panel.
And I think both of us at various sessions that we went to today at this very large music
Huge.
industry conference in its 40th year.
Imagine South by in the net, like Euro South by. This really had that scale.
Yeah, and we both sat in sessions today where someone on the panel said, can you raise your hand if you're a musician or songwriter in the room? And maybe one or two people would raise their hand of, 50 to 100 people sitting in a room.
In my panel, they asked how many of you are musicians, and one person half raised his hand and says like, I dabble. And then the next question he asked is, how many of you use ChatGPT or some other form of AI in your day-to-day professional life? And 3/4 of the room raised their hand.
That's so wild.
Woo! And I literally was on the mic. I'm like, really?
You're like, what?
What? Who are you people?
I know. I mean, on one hand, it's like, oh, like, do people like us live in a bubble that we're surrounded by artists and also surrounded by people who like vehemently reject using LLMs in our daily lives? Like, maybe, but also is important. And that came up on one of the panels that I was on. Like, I was on a panel today that was about, the future of music streaming and AI. It's pretty broad, but towards the end of the panel, I was just sort of reflecting on the fact that, like, I do feel like I'm surrounded by a lot of artists, or see a lot of artists who, like, are making their perspective clear in that, like, they are against the use of generative AI tools to fully write music, or even like partially write music. And I don't know, I think that in spaces like this, that can be seen as a radical perspective, because there has been this sort of like mass normalization that, like, yeah, like we do have to figure out how to like use these tools to our advantage. Like, artists will like benefit from like figuring out how to incorporate these tools into their work and get quote unquote fair compensation. It's like, reality check, like there are also a lot of artists who are really against this, who
Yeah.
actually think of it as really disrespectful to the craft of what they
The
do.
craft and the
And
culture and the history.
yeah, and I like, I brought up, the journalism world. I'm like, I'm a writer. Like, if I hear that someone uses Chat GPT in their quote unquote writing, I mean, the first thing I say is, well, that's not writing then,
Mm-hmm.
that is the production of text, which is not the same thing as writing. And the production of audio is not the same thing as making music,
You've literally generated the organization of sound, like
Mhm.
we're going to break it down like this, and it has a lot to do with, like you're talking about, with writing, and as well with music, is this kind of normalization of a mass de-skilling
Mhm.
event, which, as a music teacher, like I don't have to explain too much for you to understand like why I like to emphasize the importance of a trial and error, and it should be an enjoyable process that many of these people will define as friction, needless friction, right? And it seems like that it seemed obvious to you and me that that was an elephant in the room, but apparently not, as far as having that brought up as like, well, what do you say to artists, even if there aren't artists on the panel, like a question could have been as to like, what do you say to naysayer artists that, for example, would say this is, you're not only taking away my livelihood, but you're disrespecting the
Mhm.
craft and the culture and the history surrounding my livelihood. I was just, yeah, surprised that that wasn't on anyone's radar.
Yeah. I mean, I think, like you mentioned earlier, sometimes I kind of feel like a broken record talking about the importance of including musicians' voices in
Mm.
conversations about the music business and about music tech. And then it is pretty jarring to occasionally sort of like turn up to spaces like this and be like, oh, yeah, like the musicians aren't invited in the room for these conversations
Mm-hmm.
often. I mean, like,
Yeah.
I definitely saw. I was on a couple of panels today alongside like a professional songwriter who represents the interests of composers and songwriters, and definitely like really glad that perspective is included. And I saw like some panels that had a musician's perspective on them, but also like a lot where there's not,
Sure.
and I think it just sort of like drives home for me the importance of remembering that musicians are experts in their lived experience and like should be taken seriously when it comes to sort of these sort of like more macro conversations about yeah, the impacts of AI, streaming, the music business. Artists and songwriters are the ones who make this whole thing
Yeah,
possible.
what are we talking about here?
Yeah.
I'm grateful for the moderator of the panel that I was on making a point when introducing me. It was like, I really pushed for this guy as an American musician,
Mm.
and my particular panel being related to American politics and the music industry. But because he himself he was a music journalist, but when he asked the question, how many musicians we have in the audience, and one person half rose their hand, he was, visibly surprised from that as well. So he had the right intentions, and I appreciate him, at his behest of adding me to this, because, yeah, like where are
Mhm.
musicians with thoughts that want to voice them?
Mhm.
Uh,
They definitely
they
exist.
exist. They are so fucking loud, but I don't think we're in a bubble, dude.
Yeah.
Because like I talk to people far outside of our maybe more uniquely individual music niches and DIY lifer worlds. I'm friends with plenty of folks in hip hop and straightforward New York hardcore, and things like that. And it's like a unanimous sort of vibe as far as just the outright rejection of it. You know, Bandcamp just made that whole statement this week as well related to that, and I think that maybe shows. I mean, Bandcamp's its own bubble, arguably, but it's a broader than you and I's network of people, and we won't get into that in detail in this episode, but I think that's indicative of at least from, let's say, the musician community separating itself from the music industry, which I multiple times on my panel made that point of being like, well, I don't know how the industry likes to talk about this, but amongst musicians, bleh, it's this is very illuminating for me as someone who's going to my first trade conference. I know you're a veteran. Very illuminating.
Sorry. But also, I'm welcome and sorry.
Welcome to hell. But it was very illuminating to see this, like you said, musicians are not in the rooms for these conversations, because if they did, we would have a lot more vocal protesting. It's just like, you musicians come tonight for the party, for the shows, but leave the backroom deals to us in the afternoon.
Before we talk more about the panels that we were on,
yes,
we got to talk more about the second panel that we went to today. Because this one, I kind of saw the description of this one a couple of days ago before we left, and I, texted it to the critical listening group thread, because I was like, this conference is going to be lit. We got to go to this one.
We got to go. You were filled with glee. You were like, oh my God, I found the most evil thing to go to.
But it is called The Smart Music Business, Automate or Die Trying. And the description of it was, quote, "The future of music isn't just digital, it's intelligent. From predictive ticketing and AI-driven fan engagement to automated rights tracking and financial workflows, smart systems are rewriting how the industry operates. This session dives into the tension between creativity and efficiency, showing...
There's so much tension, dude.
So much efficiency. Showing how automation can unlock new value chains, empower artists and entrepreneurs, and attract serious investment." So, yes, this is what we were here to do. We were here to learn about how to unlock some new value chains. From a panel of CEOs, venture capitalists, and consultants. So
I love that.
This was really cool. Everyone was awesome, and we learned a lot. I mean, the thing that was the most striking to me about this panel is that, well, one, they were sort of presenting the idea of a more data-driven live music economy as this thing that doesn't exist yet, that will only exist if festivals hire them as consultants or pay them to inject their intelligent systems into their workflow.
Right.
Which the live music industry is already incredibly data driven. I feel like that is something that I hear from artists all the time as a complaint. Even on a smaller independent level, venues want to see our streaming stats before they will book us, or it's something that comes up all the time is I'm an artist and I want to take my music off of streaming, but then I can't get booked because venues depend on this data so much in deciding whether or not they're going to book artists. So one thing about this panel was they're the live music industry doesn't understand that it needs data, and I'm like, what are you talking about?
Yes.
It's already so dependent on data. The other thing I was struck by was the level of evangelizing that was, I mean, maybe not surprised, because that's what a lot of these conferences are for. But I feel like the whole conversation was basically about how you could use AI to make your business more efficient, which clearly is argument in favor of if you can automate these tasks, then you can hire fewer people. And they were using examples talking about these new types of ticketing companies. I think one example they pointed to was a new ticketing startup that was a two employee company, and they were sort of proudly being this is an example of a smart ticketing company that only has 2 employees doing something that even a few years ago would have been 15 people.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, that's a clear example of you saying that this type of implementation will make it so that you have to pay fewer people, or you could fire people,
Yes.
like, so to me, I was just sort of like, these are the types of like corners of the music business where the idea of AI replacing people, or like automated systems making it so that you could pay for less labor, is really being championed.
Yeah.
And that was the question that I asked in the Q&A. I was like, you're clearly talking about like this future where you could pay fewer employees. Like, what type of jobs do you foresee being the first ones to be automated, or the first types of workers that you anticipate in the live business being fired? And automatic, like, instantly they're all like, no, 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 that's not what we're talking about. And I'm just
Very
like,
defensively.
I'm like, what are you? Yes, you
Yes,
are.
you are, right?
You know?
And like, there was all this talk about like, it's about smart investments, and where it's like we're living past the hype cycle now. Like we're just, and it's like all you guys are doing is putting a bunch of hype words to describe cutting corners. You know, it's like I said, like this has all just been a wonderful exercise in dialectics as far as the importance of language here. It's been fascinating to see a lot of people who get paid a lot of money say words they don't mean.
And then it's like confusing because it's like, okay, maybe you are trying to sell your startup to the live business with the promise that you'll be able to help them do more by paying less. But maybe that's not actually possible.
Right.
And maybe that is where this reflexive sort of defensive answer of like, oh, well, we're not trying to make people lose their jobs. It's like, well, that's what you're suggesting. But maybe it's not possible, because then actually, like, in the actual, content of this panel, there are actually very few tasks that they described involved in the process of, running the live music business that actually could be automated. And one of the only ones they were talking about was like chatbots responding to support tickets, basically.
Yes. That was brought up more than once as anecdotal evidence, and it's just, okay, is that what you got? Like customer service, agentic AI, things like that. Like, okay, great. Like, we're not even going to talk about improving customer service in relation to that. Are your customers happy with this situation? But it came down to this, like, is that all you got?
Yeah. I mean, at the beginning of the panel, there was someone who very confidently and seriously said that she felt like the impact of automation on the live music sector right now is that it has shifted from being an intuition-based decision industry to a data-driven decision industry.
Dude, I love words. And dear listeners know how much I love words, and those were some words.
I know, but I also was like, you're talking about concert booking, and you're being like, yes, the state of the industry is that we have moved from intuition to data. And I think that a lot of people would agree that that does seem to be an impact that access to data has had on show booking. But to sort of celebrate that,
is that a good thing?
At a music conference that attracts a lot of people from the live music business, I'm like, what? Like, I don't know, like...
Plus, a lot of the people at this conference are the people in these jobs that are going to be replaced. It's not our jobs.
Yeah.
We're not working for the industry in this way. We're not agents.
Yeah.
We aren't working for booking agencies. We aren't working for venues and things of that nature. Everybody there is. So it's like... Even that, they're going to have to close off the conversation even further. The only middle management and higher can come to these talks, because the entry-level positions, no, go back out to the bar,
Yeah. Yeah, and enjoy your last year at this conference.
Enjoy your
like, because you're being replaced by a chatbot next year, or something.
Have yourself a free Heineken, baby.
Yeah.
On the house.
And get ready to... go back to grad school.
Get ready to get that PhD you've been putting off / be a barista.
Yeah. One absolutely wild anecdote that was shared in this panel discussion about how the live music business is becoming more automated. It was the panelists were like scrounging to come up with an example of how their service had been useful. And they talked about like a year ago or two, I don't know. At some point in recent history, there had been a music festival that relied on their AI-driven support ticket system. And there had been this big music festival, and, artists started canceling over Palestine. That's what they broadly sort of said.
Yeah, they heavily implied based on current events is what they were saying. Yes.
Yeah. Did they say Palestine, or they said
no,
based
no,
on
no,
current
no.
events?
They didn't say that in relation to war and current events.
Okay.
And we all know what we're talking about here.
Okay. It seemed very clear that that's what they were talking about. They said, that there's this festival that Doshi had canceled 24 hours before, and that it created a spike of, thousands and thousands and thousands of support tickets that had to be responded to within 24 hours.
Of people wanting their money back, yeah.
Yeah, and they talked about how this was a concrete case of how their AI-driven solution can help, because it was a nightmare for them to have to deal with all these support tickets of Dochi canceling their festival, and they're like, it was still a nightmare for them, but I hope it was a little bit less so. And I'm just like, okay, this is the only example that you could come up with, is that, like, artists are dropping off of these festivals because of, like, egregious perspectives on Palestine, and then your AI-driven support ticket chatbot system is able to respond, and like that's the best you could come up with. It just felt like
the people who were like crypto people who are just like, Bitcoin will solve this, stuff like that. It's just like, I got an answer for everything. I'm gonna have to like reach deep to find it. But man, it's like, yes, AI is going to alleviate your customer complaints when your festival makes an egregious position that forces artists with spines to cancel on you.
Yeah, like, cool.
That's so good, man.
Yeah. We heard a lot about, use cases, implementation, value creation, AI adoption. It was a good time.
It was good. Not a musician in sight. I love it. Mm-hmm. This is what I want for my industry, is to just like have these closed conversations without any consent from artist or audience, for that matter.
Mm-hmm. Were you there when the venture capitalist on the panel, who, by the way, introduced himself as saying he runs a venture studio?
Venture studio.
Yeah, yes. Cool.
And a trained audio engineer. And I was just like, et tu, Brute? Like, what happened? That's like, oh man, the studio gig didn't turn out the way that I wanted, so I'm going to do what everybody else does and become a VC, you know?
So, I think you might have left because you left at some point.
I did leave a little early on that one. Dear listener, imagine it's the morning, we are overly caffeinated because we are jet lagged, it's 80 degrees, I'm wearing my nice flannel, I'm looking sharp, I'm looking nice, and I'm just schwitzing, and I'm listening to Evil, and Liz is looking at me like, we have to be here, and
furiously writing
everything down, and I keep pointing at her pad being like, this is pissing me off right now, and visibly becoming angry, and yes, I walked out of our second panel a little early. I'm sorry, dear listener.
Understandable. But at a certain point, the VC, the venture studio owner...
Yes, he's a VS.
He was like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there's a single part of the process of creating music that has actually been impacted by generative AI.
Except mastering. Except mastering, which he's referring to.
Oh, you were still there for that.
I was still there for that, yes. When he was referring to software like Output, Lander, these Isotope, these, and 5 years ago they also existed, and they called it machine learning algorithmic, mastering plugins. They weren't calling it AI then.
He might have said replaced, not like impacted.
Yes.
But I think if you would have posed that statement to like
anyone,
any of the people at the conference representing the interests of songwriters and composers and musicians, they would have really challenged
including
that.
the panelists from the previous panel that we went to, which was all about what are we going to do to ethically handle the very real impacts that this is making on every aspect of the music creation and production process. It's like, my guy, just saying words you don't mean, please.
Yeah. So that was super interesting.
Oh my God.
And yeah, I'm really glad that we went to that.
I am too. I have a big smile on my face. I had a great time.
And then in addition to those ones that we attended, we also each spoke on some panels.
Yes, we did. Yes, we did. Which was more pleasant experience. We weren't screaming at each other on stage, which, you know,
Yeah, what was yours like?
Reservations. Mine was interesting. It was called MAGA Economics and the Music Business. And like I said, I was the only musician on it, originally not booked for this, and then added more to up to the wire, but thankful to be involved, and the only American talking about our current state of things, and it was hilarious. We had a member of European Parliament on, a real socialist, you know. It was fascinating. They had us on a semicircle on stage, and I joked, "Oh look, they put me on the far left." And then the socialist parliament member said, "I'm sure if we investigated your ideology from a European perspective, you would be much closer to the center." And I was like, "Yeah, you know what? If my life was materially better, if my life was better in the ways that a social democracy would improve my life materially, you know what? Maybe I would have a different perspective on things." So that was hilarious. So he was clowning me on that, but it was fun. The first question went straight to me, and he literally the moderator asked, "Max, first of all, how are you?" And I was like, "What do you mean?" And he was like, "Well, with all the things happening over there, how are you handling it? What, you know, like, can you tell us your perspective, boots on the ground?" And it was a broad question, to say the least, but I unfortunately had to quote Steve Bannon and saying, "Well, they're flooding the zone with shit," which is a classic Steve Bannonism of just, you know, as many of our listeners know, horrible thing after horrible thing, day after day, week after week in the States. But I was happy to be the token American with some first-hand perspective on these subjects.
Kind of interesting that there was even a panel on that topic at a music industry conference.
It was a light crowd compared to some of the other panels that I attended, I will say that, but no problems. There was plenty of people there. Again, one person semi-raised their hand saying they were a musician. I don't know. There were some journalists there. That it seemed to be a journalist-heavy crowd for that, which I guess would make sense for something related to sociopolitics and music industry. But it was a perfectly civil conversation. A member of Amnesty International was there with a very interesting Eurocentric perspective on the matters. But, you know, we're the soft power, baby. Like, this is something that affects them as well. But, you know, American politics very much informed by certain members of European political class. We talked a lot about Viktor Orban and the Hungarian president, who has been, you know, for years a huge source of inspiration for Trumpism and things of that. This right-wing fake populism, things like that. So it was a fascinating talk. I don't regret doing it. It was refreshing to talk to some somewhat sane people after that morning we both experienced. How about you?
Yeah, and I guess, you know, I wasn't at that talk because we were
scheduled
at the same time.
We had split up for a few hours.
While this was happening, I was in a different room on a panel about the future of music streaming and AI. And that was, you know, pretty interesting. We were talking a lot about the different approaches that the industry is taking to like labeling generative AI music. I mean, something that was kind of like rare and interesting for me is that there was actually someone from Deezer on the panel. I don't often do panels that actually include representatives from streaming companies, largely because oftentimes streaming companies don't send people from their companies to speak publicly at events like this. And it's kind of like interesting to me because Deezer has introduced detection software, so they're labeling generative AI music visibly on the platform. It's part of the user experience. They have detection software. They can, with like 95% accuracy, or it might be a little bit higher than that, detect when something has been made with generative AI, specifically like if it's made with Suno or Udio. And while there are a lot of things about all streaming services that I find to be objectionable, the the streaming model, regardless of what streaming service you're talking about, is a model that is like heavily impacted by the interests of the major record labels. It is a model designed by the major record labels for their benefit. Those criticisms apply across the board to all services. But that said, I do think that it is important for streaming services to be taking seriously the work of labeling AI music. I don't think that it only is their responsibility. I think that there also is a responsibility on the rights holder or the artist or label when the work is distributed to streaming services. I also think that the distribution companies that in many cases are the ones delivering the music to streaming services also play a role. Like there's like multiple layers of responsibility. But it was interesting to kind of hear that perspective, even though, when you talk to someone from a streaming company publicly, they're delivering like highly curated talking points.
Yes, media training. There was a whole lot of media training at this event. Let's say that.
Gotta acknowledge that.
Who else was on this panel?
Yeah, so there's like someone from like a sort of like songwriting rights organization, kind of like the equivalent of like a PRO, but like in the Netherlands. And then there was someone from organization that represents the interests of songwriters and composers. It was an interesting conversation. Both of the panels that I was on today had Helene Lindeval, who is the president of ECSA, which is the European Composer and Songwriter Alliance, which is like an association of composers and songwriters from all over Europe. But what was interesting to me is that she actually is quoted in my book because when I was researching sort of the early history of streaming, I was kind of like digging through music press archives for, writers and voices who were early on in like streaming critique. And like she had a bunch of columns in The Guardian in like 2009, like the year or the year after Spotify had launched in the UK, and really early on was like questioning this model. Yeah. Like in some cases, even when the license negotiations were still ongoing, kind of like really early to shine a light on the pro rata business model and like ask tough questions of it. So I was really excited to be on 2 panels with her. But the second panel that I was on was called Rethinking Music Consumption. It was with Helion and then Austin from Subvert.
Yeah, shout out to Austin.
That's the second panel that we've done together in the past year. And
I was able to catch that one as an audience member, which I was grateful for.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting. Subvert is not like the only one of the emerging sort of cooperative music platforms that I think is really interesting, but anyone who is trying to experiment with a more cooperative approach to distributing music, I think is, worth our time and consideration.
Absolutely.
So yeah, that was really cool, and I appreciated that conversation.
And it was good having her as the moderator for that one. Was she the moderator for the first one as well, or
She's
just
a panelist?
Panelist. Okay, cool. So it was good coming from a composer's perspective of talking about there various topics were brought up, such as you know, exclusivity or scarcity. You know, do I want to put something up on one platform as an alternative and not the others and whatnot? But you know, it felt like a very artist centric set of questions, being that she is a composer herself as well as the president of the advocacy group. And I believe it was streaming fatalism. The Matt Dryhurst term was brought up a few times, which I thought was a great talking point about, like, you know, very Mark Fisher-esque of like, can we imagine the end of the world before we can imagine the end of capitalism, and in the streaming fatalism of just like we can imagine the end of the world before we imagine the end of streaming, which is it's true for many people, at least from the normies, but it was nice to talk about the various alternatives, not only co-op models such as Subvert, but, you know, even Helene was talking about, you know, listening to the radio, you know, listening to BBC Classical if she feels the need to have something to put on while writing emails, rather than going into the algotorial, what's the term for Spotify perfect fit content playlists?
I mean, I agree that so the streaming fatalism term, I feel like oftentimes is brought up when as trying to sort of like counter the idea of artists participating in an effort to regulate streaming services. And there's this idea that, like, why are we going to waste our energy trying to make streaming services more fair? Can we not imagine anything else other than streaming?
Right. And is there no alternative?
And like, I'm very much of the perspective that, like, yes, we should build alternatives. Like, the alternatives are the horizon. Like, it is really important work to support and participate in and imagine alternatives. Like, I can absolutely imagine alternatives and do, but I also think that, like, at the same time, I don't think that it's mutually exclusive to believe deeply in building alternatives and also to believe deeply in, like, the importance of contributing to, like, the very hard work of trying to figure out, like, how artists can organize to, like, not only figure out how, you know, the music labor sector broadly can be stronger, but to push for regulation of these streaming services. Like, I didn't say this on the panel because I get the point, right? But something that I was thinking about is, like, if you were advocating for, like, Amazon workers to be paid more, would you say, oh, it's Amazon fatalism?
Right.
Right? Like, we live in a world where, like, Amazon is one of the biggest corporations in the world and it employs an absurd number of people. Like, it's not Amazon fatalism to be like, let's make sure that these workers get paid fairly.
Yes, they have the money.
But with music and streaming, it is like, if you're like, artists whose music on streaming should get paid more and artists should organize to try to improve their working conditions, it's like, well, that's streaming fatalism because you can't imagine anything else other than this reality. It's like, I don't know, like, I kind of think I disagree a little bit with that.
No, I don't think it was. I don't think that the term was used as just like, this is the way.
I don't think Austin was using it that way, but I've
it's
definitely
just
seen
as
other
a
people.
as a theory, we've definitely seen that being passed around in action. But yes, no, I agree. It's a yes and conversation. And you know, this is Europe. This is the capital of government regulation, soft regulation, and things like that. It felt very American to hear all these Europeans talking about, like, talking against regulation and things like that. I'm sure our venture studio owner is not a fan of things like that, as it's not necessarily in the interest of business for it to have government regulation for the sake of employee rights and fairness of certain things such as artist payouts. You know?
I mean, also there's just, like, stronger labor protections in
Absolutely.
Europe also, so
Absolutely.
that's something that kind of came up in some of my, like, side convos that I had with some other people today about, you know, the presence of tech in Europe. It is like, yeah, it's not as strong here because there's greater labor protections here.
Yeah, man. That's the dream job, is working for an American corporation in Europe, where if your boss is telling you, we need you to stay to 7:30 to work on something, or we need this done, it doesn't matter how long it takes. You could be like, no, 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 5 p.m. It's the law, things like that, which, they don't have so much in the States, because we're a bootstrap. I thought you were down to build. Let's build, bro, right? What happened? I thought you were down to see this through. We got you a pizza.
We got you a pizza.
Sleep under your desk. We got you a pizza.
So I guess something that we failed to mention this whole time of recording is that actually, at the beginning of the conversation, it was like, why are we here? Partially because we are doing a live taping of Critical Listening tomorrow morning.
Yes, we are.
And we are going to be in conversation with a Dutch journalist who has done reporting on private equity in the live music space, and also tax avoidance by pop musicians and people in high power, people in the music business. So I'm really looking forward to that conversation.
Yes, we're happy to be here, and that conversation is going to be fascinating. I'm really looking forward to it. Let's real quick, while wrapping up here, what are some goals, Liz? Let's manifest some goals for season 2, because I think, like I said, the illumination for me is leaving how little artists are involved in this conversation, and I think that we, as a media platform, are intrinsically, inherently trying to be the antithesis of that. We had a lot of artists on last season, and I think that we're just gonna have to keep it up. It seems necessary.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely was thinking about that today when we were sort of wandering these conference grounds, talking about how it kind of seemed like there weren't very many musicians around on these talks. And yeah, I think every person we interviewed last year on the show was a musician. Even the interviews that we did with writers were writers who are also musicians. So I'm looking forward to continuing to try to have that be a through line. Definitely, I think something we were talking about today is I'm also interested in interviewing researchers and academics, and obviously those folks are not always also musicians too. But trying to just keep musicians' voices centered, I think.
Absolutely.
And present.
This is not, as much as they're trying, it's just, none of this is going to happen. None of this industry stuff is going to happen without those people involved, Culture trickles upwards. No matter how much you want to automate or die. I wanted to die, but they were automating then. As much as they are pushing for that, I foresee this being an issue for a lot of these people. The more they leave artists out of the equation and out of the conversation, eventually a brick wall is going to be, or rather, a brick wall will be established and solidified between these industry types and those in the industry alone, even executives and C-suite folks that understand that people want musicians, humans making their music. Those that want to go to these concerts, things of that nature. Who do you think it's like, are we going to go watch Hatsune Miku? Are we going to go watch holograms of, what's her name? The Monet artist that was talking
Monet,
about what's her name?
Sonia, I think.
Sonia Monet, her. It was its name or whatever. The generative artist that's just an avatar and Suno tracks, this is not going to lead towards a fruitful outcome for so many different corners of the corporate music industry. So we're going to see a further divide over the years, and fans, listeners, passive and active, I think inevitably are going to end up on the right side of this conversation. But they want to go scorched earth with it and make a endless sync market for Toyota commercials and things of that nature, let them.
Mm-hmm. I thought of one more goal for 2026.
Tell me.
Talk about something that's not AI.
Talk about something that's not AI. Get it the fuck out of here.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, for myself, I feel like that past year I've talked about it a lot. I'm asked to talk about it a lot. And it's very important to talk about. That's why it has been a subject of many of our headlines episodes, etc. But, not only are there other things to talk about, but in this current moment, when you talk about AI, what you're actually often just talking about is corporations trying to become more efficient,
Cutting corners.
Yeah, cutting corners.
And that's why, dear listener, we are going to spend 100% more time talking about cryptocurrency. Our new sponsors, Coinbase, thank you so much for the support.
Yeah.
We have completely pivoted towards crypto. No more AI. Just pro crypto content shilling from here on out.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, ESNS, for having us.
Thank you, ESNS, for having us. We love your beautiful country, and I do mean that. I do love the Netherlands.
Yeah.
Thank you for listening. My name's Max Alper.
I'm Liz Pelly.
Hi, Liz Pelly. This has been Critical Listening, Season 2, Episode 1, I guess Episode 11 overall, and we'll catch you on the flip side. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the Critical Listening Podcast. The show is created and written by Liz Pelly and myself, Max Alper. And our associate producer and audio engineer is Nick Zanka. You can support the show by joining the Patreon at patreon.com/criticallistening, where you'll have early access to episodes before they hit the public platforms, as well as our Discord community. And our theme song is the track Talk to Me by the band Eraser.